What's up, everybody? It's Brandon LeCaren here, and today we are talking about emerging markets. That's right. I'm going to talk to you guys about what the signs are of an emerging market, where some emerging markets are, and how you could get in before the rest of the developers. So let's talk about first what an emerging market is and what it means to me. So I call emerging markets markets that are starting to turn over, right? So there's two types of market, first of all, right? There's high cash flow markets and then there's high growth markets, right? And typically when you have a high growth markets, they don't have a lot of like rental appreciation. There's not a ton of cash flow in those markets. You're looking at more of like a 5 or 6% cap rate, and they're typically like cities. So Washington D.C. or somewhere in Northern Virginia, maybe Austin, Texas right now. L.A. Miami is also another one, right? So those are all like high growth markets because the real estate prices in those areas are going to continue to go up over time, and that's what most people get in on is because they care more about the equity. The other markets are high cash flow markets, right? So high cash flow markets are typically like sub markets or areas that are not necessarily desirable by the general public, or there's no major cities in those areas, right? So typically parts of Baltimore is one, right? Tons of places in Baltimore and neighborhoods where it's great cash flow and then not a lot of appreciation, not a high growth market. Parts of Michigan, right? Detroit, right? Detroit is a high cash flow market, right? Cleveland's a high cash flow market. All these markets, will continue to provide cash flow and may not necessarily go up in value as fast as a high growth market. So that's the two different types of markets. Now, what an emerging market is to me, and again, this is just my definition, but when you have a high cash flow market that is getting ready to transition into becoming a high growth market. So I call them emerging markets because they still have great cash flow and you're able to transition that. You're able to get in early, and then when the real estate flips and it starts becoming a high growth market, you benefit from A, getting at a low price, B, great rental income, and C, now the growth market, right? So you're benefiting of all those things that comes with both markets, but you're getting in at the right time. So, with an emerging market, you want to look for areas that are starting to see major development changes, right? So maybe you're seeing tower cranes. I always say this to our students is that follow the tower cranes. Tower cranes are a great indicator of like where a certain market is going to go or city, because those larger players, they're playing with millions and even billions of dollars sometimes. They move a lot slower. Think of them as a big whale, right? Or a big ship. It's really hard to turn that ship around compared to a little dinghy, right? You're out in the open ocean. You could turn that dinghy around in a split second, right? So you are a dinghy, right? No matter how much money you got. You can have millions of dollars ready to invest, but you're still a dinghy compared to these larger developers that are investing in these markets. So wherever you see tower cranes, that's a good indication of where that market's going to go and what's coming there, because people that build buildings using tower cranes, they're massive buildings. They've done a ton of research into the area, and their expectancy is that the market is going to go into sort of a growth market, and it's worth investing in there to bring their people there, right? Because typically it's companies like Google or maybe Micron or Lockheed or some form of a big company that's coming there, and like Apple, and they're investing in those areas because they feel like it's going to be a good area to A, invest in, and B, there's talent already there that they're kind of seeking out, right? So one of the things that we look for is what's going on as well. Like, so you see the tower cranes, and then maybe you start seeing where developers are starting to come in, right? So maybe some medium tier developers, people that are home flippers or new home builders are coming in, they're buying up land. So you'll notice that things start changing over, and a trick that I look at is look at the cars in the neighborhood, because those cars tend to change over before the look of the houses, right? So when you look at the cars, like for instance, like if you drive down the street and you just see cars on blocks, like rundown cars, like look like it should be in a junkyard kind of thing, like that's like a good area to generally, they have high cash flow, right? But if you start seeing like, okay, maybe there's a rundown car, maybe there's a Volkswagen, maybe a Mercedes or something, it's kind of starting to show early signs of it changing over into a growth market. So those are the things that I look for. You look at the cars in the neighborhood because it gives you a good sense of who actually is living there and who's moving there, right? So when you do that, you're seeing that the developers are coming in. Another sign is that rentals are starting to go up in pricing, right? So you might start seeing nicer properties that are hitting the market, right? So some nicer properties are like, oh man, like this thing's fully renovated, it's ready to go, and people are renting it for sort of a premium. So start looking at those things where rental prices are a little bit different. Maybe you're like, hey, like this is typically renting for about $1,000 a month, and then you see something odd like 1,500, and then you see it's actually a nicer building or a nicer unit. You're like, okay, that's a sign. So that's the sort of like thing you got to look for. Another thing is anchor stores, right? So anchor stores like a Wegmans, like a Whole Foods, like a REI, these sort of stores spend a ton of money in research to decide whether or not their store is going to make money, right? Or a Starbucks, right? They're in the business of opening stores. They're not in the business of closing stores. So you want to make sure that you look and see like what stores are coming to that area, right? Or even gas stations, right? Sometimes you see like certain places that don't only have like a small town gas station or something. Then you see all of a sudden a Sheetz is going up, or a Wawa or something, right? Those are all signs of like anchor stores. Like these companies spend millions of dollars every single year in research to do what's called feasibility studies to determine whether or not it's a good market to invest in and put a store there. Because again, Starbucks is in the business of putting up stores, not closing stores. So you want to make sure that you are also paying attention to these anchor stores and that drive a different demographics. Because again, it's going to show that, hey, some of the demographics is already here to support this store, so we're going to go ahead and jump in. So that's essentially like what an emerging market is and how to kind of get into it, right? Again, just to recap, you want to look for the tower cranes. You want to follow the tower cranes because you can move a lot faster than they can. You want to look for anchor stores because anchor stores tend to, call for a certain demographics like Target, like, Starbucks and stuff like that. You want to look and see what cars are on the street because that's a good indication of like who's living there and who's wanting to move into those things. Another thing that we talk about is whether the properties that are being rented are renovated or not, right? Typically there's like a disparity between how much the normal market rent is versus like what the newer homes are renting for, or the newly renovated properties are rented for. And when you're entering an emerging market, you want to kind of be the first one in, right? Because you're playing the long game. This is not like you're going to get in and then flip a property and be done with it, right? Yes, you can flip the property and make some decent money, but the idea is that you're playing the long game. You're either doing BTR, build to rent, or the BRRRR strategy, and you're just capitalizing on the high cash flow and the growth at the same time because it's getting ready to flip, and when it flips, then you'll benefit from the high growth market. So those are just some of the things that I look for in an emerging market, and some emerging markets that I like. I think Cleveland is one right now. I do think that certain parts of Baltimore, certain neighborhoods in Baltimore are kind of transitioning. I would say parts of Richmond, right? So Richmond, Virginia is a huge one. It's actually one of my favorite and submarkets of those major cities, right? So like Richmond, there's Petersburg, there's Short Pump, there's Henrico, right? All these Midlothian, all these areas surrounding the city. Because what happens is as the city gets more and more expensive, it tends to like push people out, right? So you want to make sure that you're looking for those cities and those submarkets that are high in rent, that are getting ready to flip into a high growth market. So hope you guys enjoyed this video a little bit about transitioning markets and like emerging markets. I hope it was helpful. If it was, please hit the subscribe button below. I'd love to see you on my next one, and I'll talk to you guys later. Take care.